And I remember sitting there thinking, what do I believe? That this is Christianity is ridiculous. The Bible is ridiculous. Like, think about the stories in the Bible. How could any of them have happened? And that came as such a shock to me to have those thoughts, but then also to have my brain believe those thoughts. Like, I believed them with a conviction. And I was like, it scared me. I was terrified. And so I immediately prayed. But then in the back of my mind, I was thinking, what am I even praying to? Is there anybody there? Like, what a ridiculous thing that we're doing right now. I mean, this is a bunch of superstition. And so these thoughts play.
I'm thrilled you're here with us on The Christian Clinician, where we join faith with evidence-based medicine to revitalize your health and renew your faith. Get ready for real and informative conversations with wellness experts and Christian scholars alike to gain a deeper understanding of our faith, explore our God-given purpose, and discover how the strength of our relationship with God can impact our health here on earth.
Welcome to another episode of The Christian Clinician. I'm your host, Tanya Painter, and this is the first of my solo episodes. So while I'll also be interviewing many practitioners and patients and really talking about the health journey, I also think it's vitally important for us to kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of the topics, both health and spiritual related, to help us to really understand what we believe and why we believe it, to help strengthen that faith. And that in turn helps to strengthen our relationship with God and vice versa. As we work on strengthening our relationship with God, our faith grows. So I am currently in a master's program for applied apologetics, and we are studying all kinds of science and archaeology and philosophy around God and the resurrection and miracles and all kinds of things, and showing what kind of evidence we have that supports biblical truth. Not that we necessarily need it, but a lot of us do need it. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. In 2023, I almost lost my faith. So this was a very dark period with a lot of struggles for me. I had so many doubts come up about my faith, about why I believed what I believed. I was raised a Christian, and I've been a Christian my whole life. And it didn't occur to me to ever really question what I had been taught before. God was God, Jesus was Jesus. I knew him and I had a relationship with him, and I talked with him. I was very involved in youth group in high school. I was a Bible study leader on my college campus. And so I've had a very close walk with God my entire life. And then one day I was thumbing through a small book that I had gotten many years ago called World Religions in 30 Seconds. And basically what it was is each page or each two pages, you'd open it up and it would be on a different religion. So there was Buddhism and there was Islam and there was, Mormon, and there were some of the ancient religions and Hindu and then of course Christianity. And as I was reading through it, it struck me that Christianity had so many very similar things to all of these other religions that I thought were not true and had no basis for anything. And the way the book was written, unfortunately, was very skeptical of any type of religion as well. And so the way that they phrased things it just all hit me really, really hard. And I remember sitting there thinking, what do I believe? That this is Christianity is ridiculous. The Bible is ridiculous. Like, think about the stories in the Bible. How could any of them have happened? And that came as such a shock to me to have those thoughts, but then also to have my brain believe those thoughts. Like, I believed them with a conviction, and I was like, it scared me. I was terrified. And so I immediately prayed, but then in the back of my mind, I was thinking, what am I even praying to? Is there anybody there? Like, what a ridiculous thing that we're doing right now. I mean, this is a bunch of superstition. And so these thoughts plagued me, and I spent all of 2023 praying constantly, day in and day out. And I would read the Bible and I would be like, why am I reading this? This doesn't seem to make any sense to me. And I would pray for deliverance from it. And in my heart, I knew God to be true, and I held on to that. But my brain had all of these doubts and all of these things about how, there were so many discrepancies between science and Christianity and science in the Bible. And that kind of I dove down that rabbit hole a little bit to see, what kind of science, what kind of things outside of the Bible. What if I think that the Bible is not true? What kind of evidence do we have outside of the Bible that actually supports Christianity? And so I started digging a little bit. And if you're not familiar with the term apologetics, that's what I was doing. I didn't even know it. Apologetics is a defense of the faith. That's what it means in Latin. It's to defend. And it basically means to look at all of the evidence that we have to believe to share why we believe what we believe. So the guiding scripture for this is 1 Peter 3:15. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. So this is what I was doing for myself. I was diving into any non-biblical evidence that we had to show that Jesus lived, that he was a real person, that he died on the cross, and what evidence we might have, if any, of the fact that he rose, bodily rose, like he rose from the dead. And what proof do we have even that God does exist outside of my own experience, or what I thought was my own experiences, right? And what I had been taught. And so I dove into this and I started researching different aspects, and started really identifying areas of doubt for me where I was struggling to believe. And I essentially deconstructed my entire belief system and started down from the basics and worked my way back up based on evidence. And should we need that? I don't know. Some of us, I think, are very logical, and I don't think there's any shame in that, which is why I wanted to share this episode today, because I think that I know I felt like a terrible person and a terrible Christian. Here I was supposed to be this strong believer, and I was having this major crisis of faith. And to my shame, like, I didn't even reach out to my church about it. I didn't let my pastor know. I didn't ask anybody to pray for me. This was something that I struggled with on my own. And that's probably why it took me a full year to get past it. But I'll fast forward to the end. The good news is that I remember my breaking point, and I was so tired. I was so tired of fighting my head, the logic piece that just couldn't get on board with what my heart was feeling. In my heart, I knew that God was real, and I just remember this prayer of desperation saying, God, I can't take this anymore. I understand what you're having me do, but I need to know that you're there and you're with me, and I need you to remove these thoughts and banish the demons or the evil or whatever it is that's putting these here. And I fell asleep and I woke up the next day, and my faith has been rock solid ever since. So he was very faithful in answering that prayer of desperation. But it really led me down this path of understanding there are many people who have I didn't even realize that this was a thing, right? I didn't even know what apologetics was. I didn't realize that there are other people who needed to hear that until I started doing my own research. Because, you live in your own little world, and you think that that what you believe is, I mean, blissfully you're unaware of what other people think and believe and struggle with. And so that I think that was the whole purpose of why I had to go through that, is to understand like what it feels like to be torn. And I'm just so thankful that that God was didn't let me go. He didn't let me go. And I thank him every day for that. So I thought it was really important for us to just kind of open up a conversation about doubts that we had. I had doubts about all of it. Doubts about creation, doubts about Adam and Eve, doubts about, the flood actually happening, doubts about the miracles, the plagues, all of it. And so the more that I dug, the more evidence I started finding. And I'm going to be sharing a lot of that with you over the course of multiple episodes. So many of us need to have some of that logic. The left brain needs some of this evidence, and I've always admired people who could just walk in faith, and I think that they are so blessed. And they don't need this logic. They don't need the research. They don't care about anything that man has discovered, because they hold the Bible in such high esteem. And if that's you, I applaud you. I wish that I had that level of faith. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know. God made me the way he did. And I need some of that evidence. I need some of the science and understanding. That's how my brain has always been wired. And I've come to realize like that's just how God made me. And I'm sure that he gave me this crisis of faith so that I could dive into the science, so that I could bring some of that to you, so that you could learn some of what I've been learning in my master's program. So we'll be doing that over however many episodes God wants me to release. And we're going to be talking a lot about some of the evidence that we have and addressing some of those common doubts that I see. I'm in several religious conversation groups and see a lot of the arguments against Christianity. And of course, I'm learning a lot about those arguments against Christianity in our master's class. So we know how to effectively address them. And there is so much logic, so much science, so much research that actually backs up biblical truth. And it's so interesting because there are pieces in the Bible where the Bible is different than history, at least our understanding of history based on archaeological findings and things like that. And yet, every time there's a discrepancy, 50, 60 years later after this, major, oh, look, this is the Bible's wrong. Oh, wait, we actually found a new discovery that shows that the Bible's actually correct. So, it's just fascinating to continue seeing that where there is a discrepancy between our understanding of history or science or whatever it is and the Bible, that the Bible has always, whenever we have been able to prove it right, has always been proven right. There has never yet been one that we can definitively prove as wrong, because just a lack of evidence that supports something in the Bible doesn't mean that it proves the Bible's wrong. It means that we don't necessarily know if we have all the evidence. Our current understanding might be different, but the Bible ultimately always seems to show that it's right. And so, and again, I'll talk about some of these arguments and things as we progress through some of these conversations, but I thought it was important just to share my a little bit about my experience and the doubts that I've had, and to let you know that if you are somebody who struggles with doubts, if you really want to believe, but you haven't quite gotten there, or even if you have called yourself Christian your entire life, but there's pieces of the Bible story or scripture that you just can't wrap your brain around or you can't fully get behind, I get it. I understand where you're coming from, and I also know how alone you can feel because in my experience, up until the church that I'm at currently, they're very open to discussing doubts and answering questions and diving into things, which has been very, very helpful for me. But up until then, anytime I ever brought any doubts or questions or concerns, um, to a pastor or to people in the churches that I've attended, the answer was always, well, you just have to have more faith, or just pray about it and God will reveal the truth to you. Or, um, you know, and that's wonderful and that's great. And if it works for them, that's fine. But there are a lot of us that answer doesn't cut it. We need more evidence. We need to understand how to reconcile scientific findings with biblical truth. And it's completely available to do that. So if you experience doubts, and you feel like you can't talk to anybody about it because you've had kind of this same experience, like what's the point of asking? Or even, if you feel judged because you have these doubts, I think all of us, every Christian has doubts. And if somebody says they don't have any doubts, I don't know if I fully believe them. Maybe they don't even realize that they have doubts, but there are definitely areas where we're not as solid in our faith and our understanding as we think we are. And so if you've been dealing with that, or you are afraid to dive into your doubts because you're afraid like your whole religion, your whole belief system will fall apart, let me assure you that it will not. In fact, the more you dive into Christianity and the evidence that we have with an understanding and a relationship with God already in place, it just solidifies it. So I would encourage you to do that. Don't be afraid to dive into it, because if you truly believe in your heart, he's not going to let you go. He won't let you go. He'll be there for you. And I would also love to be there for you. If that is something that you have an issue with, that you have questions about, something that you want to talk about, and you don't feel like you have any safe place to do that, I would ask that you please write me a comment, or you can even email me directly, support@psalmmedical.com. I would be more than happy to engage in some of that conversation with you, because I've been there. It's lonely, it's scary, and a lot of times you feel like nobody else understands. And I want to assure you that there are those of us who do understand. And I, for one, would love to dive into some of that. And I would be happy to point you in the right direction with some resources and some books. In fact, there are a few that are great to get started with if you have not really dove into this and you'd like to read a little bit more. So one book that I really, really love is Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ. Actually, Lee Strobel's The Case for Anything is amazing. If you're not familiar with Lee Strobel, he was a journalist, he was an atheist, and his wife turned Christian, and he set out to disprove Christianity to get her out of the quote unquote cult that he thought she was caught up in. And as he went through his 2-year journey, he was doing all kinds of digging into the science and the philosophy, all the things. And 2 years later, he gave his life to Christ as well. He realized that this is the truth, and he had been mistaken his entire life. And so it's an amazing story. And then any of his case fours, case for heaven, case for faith, case for miracles, case for Christ, I would start with case for Christ and the case for the resurrection. Those are wonderful, and he goes around and uses his journalistic skills to interview different people in the various fields that they are experts in. So you get some really solid foundational understanding of some of the very basic Christian tenets. Two other resources I'd like to share is I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norman Geisler, and Cold Case Christianity by J. Warner Wallace. Those are three excellent authors. They are both very logical, or they are all logical, left brain thinkers wanting to look at the science and apply logic and all of that to biblical truth, biblical understanding. So I would really encourage you to dive a little bit into some of those as a starting point to learn some of the basic arguments for Christianity. And I think you will be surprised that there are a lot of people out there who share some of the same doubts and skepticisms as you might find yourself facing. So with that, I would love to end with a couple of scriptural references that can help in situations like this, one of which was kind of my mantra during 2023 when I was struggling. And that is Mark 9:24 specifically. So this is part of the story where a father brings his son who is demon possessed to Jesus for healing, and asks him to help heal his son. And the father, he Jesus tells him, if you believe, that your son will be healed. And Mark 9:24 says, immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, help my unbelief. So that to me summed it all up. I believe. I truly believed. I've always believed, but I had unbelief as well. And that God understands that war. Jesus understands that, right? It's in the Bible for us to read. We're not alone. This is not new or unique to us. We experience this together, and it's just not something we always talk about, because I think there's a lot of shame and guilt around it. Both personally, we feel that way when we profess to be Christians, but then also, nobody in church wants to talk about it either. It's not something that is encouraged to be discussed. So if you have a church that does encourage that, then you are blessed, because that has not been my experience up until finally, after 45 years, I finally found a church who is open to talking about these kinds of things and looking at some of these evidence. And it's just so good for my soul. Another one is written by Paul, Romans 10:17. So faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. And so that is such a call for us to be in the Bible every day. If you struggle with doubts, just be in the Bible, be in prayer, constantly ask him to show you, to lead you to the resources that you need, and he will be faithful in doing so, because that was my experience through my crisis. Psalm 34:4 was written by King David, and he wrote, I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. And again, that was my experience too. I kept pursuing him, I kept asking. And I think Psalm 94:18 through 19 also fits in with this. When I thought my foot slips, your steadfast love, O Lord, held me up. When the cares of my heart are many, your consolations cheer my soul. And he did. I was in a major slipping point. I was sliding down that hill so fast, and God saved me from that. He rescued me. And so we can just turn to him, even if we're not 100% solid. Even I only had maybe like 5% of faith, but I held on to that 5% with all my heart. And I kept trying to pursue whatever I could. And I kept praying, whether or not I even thought there was a God at that point. I don't even know, but I kept praying to him. And he knew deep in my heart that I wanted him, and he didn't let me go. And then, of course, we all know the story of Doubting Thomas, right? Doubting Thomas, found in John 20:24-29, also is a fantastic sum up of somebody who doesn't believe fully, right? There is always that seed of doubt. And Thomas was one of the 12 apostles. Like, he walked with Jesus. He knew what Jesus was capable of, and he still doubted in the resurrection. Because Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So that was the initial, when Jesus came the first time after his resurrection. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." And Thomas, but he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." That's some pretty strong words. I will never believe. So he was totally doubting, right? 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." And Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." And so he's talking to us. We have never had the blessing of being able to see Jesus in person. And so he knows again that it's hard, that it's a struggle, that there are many of us who are made, and we're made with doubts, and we need to have that proof. And so he's placed plenty of proof throughout history, in the world, even within our own bodies, within our DNA and our cell structure. I mean, he has given us proof. It's just up to us to seek him in that. So with that, I will end for today, and I hope that you have found this uplifting and encouraging. Please, I do ask that if you do have doubts or you feel alone in your struggles, please reach out to me either by email or by leaving a comment, and let me know how I can help support you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Please subscribe for more topics like this, where we focus on bringing our faith and health together for a whole you. If you have questions around your health or your faith, including doubts and struggles with what you've been taught about God, we'd love to have you send us an email at support@psalmmedical.com.